Hello, BookTube. I recently had an upset in my plans here at Hyde Cottage. I had a whole set of plans to do one thing, and at the last minute, that turned out not to be possible. And the minute that turned out not to be possible, a whole bunch of new plans sprang up that were a lot less palatable. And one of them involved an appointment early this morning in Boston. Uh, so I went out. I went out and about, and as usual, as I've mentioned before, when I have something unpleasant to do, this was not a pleasant appointment. When I have something unpleasant to do, I usually try to leaven it with something pleasant, with an indulgence. In this case, as in so many cases, the Brattle Bookshop seemed like the perfect thing. It was a little bit cold, but no precipitation, no ice. So I went to the Brattle Bookshop and I got some books, and I want to show them to you. And those of you who don't care about the books as much as you do about my subway stories, well, I don't have any subway stories. This time around, the subway was well behaved. I read the whole way there and back. Not that it's that long. It's not that long, but I read the whole way there and back. I read on the way into town. I read From the Depths, that Star Trek novel that I showed you the other day that I got the other day. I read From the Depths, and it was very, very interesting. It was a lot more interesting than I remembered. A lot more gestures at Star Trek lore than I remembered. It's a perfect example of something that's been on my mind for a couple of years now, which is that I really should reread all of the Star Trek novels for the original show, because I burned through them when I first got them. I was so eager to read any new Star Trek that I just burned through them, which helps me to I remember details of them, but it certainly doesn't help with savoring and with figuring out what the author's doing particularly well or particularly poorly. There are a couple of things in From the Depths that are done particularly poorly. You watch, if you're an old style, an original Star Trek fan, one of the things you look for is whether or not characters are well done. Your favorite characters are well done. And whether or not other in-continuity characters are believable. This novel features a special envoy, a special envoy from the Federation. So in other words, a woman on board the Enterprise who is an envoy from the Federation, but is not part of Starfleet. She's not part of the chain of command. She can't pull rank on Captain Kirk. And I can see what the author was trying to do with making her the way she is, but she wouldn't have her job at all, and wouldn't even be a sub-undersecretary to a flunky of someone in her position, the way she is actually portrayed on the page. But there was some very interesting stuff about the Klingons, and a reference to the eugenics wars, to Khan Noonien Singh, that I'd completely forgotten. I'd completely forgotten that there was a thread connecting the one with the other. So I read that on the way in, and I read, what I always do when I get books at the Brattle, I read them. I poke around in them on the way back. So the subway allowed me to do that. So there are no subway stories. There are no crazy people this time around. But I do still have a story. It's not a subway story. It's a sidewalk story. I was walking on my way to the Brattle. I was walking down the side street on my way to the Brattle, and I saw someone walking their dog on the sidewalk coming towards me. And the closer I got, the more I realized that it was an older woman. Probably, it's difficult for me to tell with humans. She's probably 50 or 60, something like that. And she was walking a very, very old dog. Very old. 17 at least, white-faced, stiff, good health, but white-faced, white head, white shoulders, white withers, white everything, and obviously blind with cataracts, or almost so, and so light and shadow movement like that. Fortunately, dogs don't stress too much about that, and they have fantastic senses that typically don't dim with age. This dog, I was smiling at her long before she got to me, because they were moving very slow. So by the time that I was close, her owner had noticed that I was smiling, and she seemed like a wonderful person, and said she doesn't get around very fast anymore, and she said it with a smile on her face. So I took that as an invitation and asked, could I meet her? Can I meet her? Is she okay with that? Is she okay with meeting strangers, especially if she can't see them clearly? And the woman said, oh yes, absolutely, go ahead. So I did what I always do. I never meet dogs from a towering height. I always get down right to their level. So I squatted down immediately. Some owners are a little taken aback by that. It's a little odd for them, but I squatted down and I extended my arms and gathered her into me. She walked forward until her head bumped like that, and then I hugged her, and I lowered my face until it was right next to hers, till it was right next to her ear, and I introduced myself and I said hello, and she had a wonderful reaction. She really did. It was an honor to meet her, and once her reaction was over, once I was done saying hi, once she started smooching me and in that hesitant and dry way that very old dogs have. Once we broke apart for a minute, the owner said, "Wow, you have a way with dogs. She really likes you." And I didn't know what to say. I was weeping a little, and the woman could clearly see that. She knew what so many dog owners realize, which is that something strange had just happened. That it wasn't just a stranger meeting her dog. I wanted to say something to her. I wanted to hug her as well and thank her for all the wonderful stuff, for 17 years of a wonderful life that she gave to this person, this sweet old dog. I didn't. I just thanked her and said that was wonderful and walked on. But that is your Steve dog story, is that I met and introduced myself to a very, very old dog. And it made me wonder, it always does, when I see somebody walking an old dog inch by inch, just creeping along like that. It always makes me wonder, is that what I look like here in the neighborhood? When I was walking my girls at the end of their life, that was 2 years, almost 2 years, where they could barely move at all. They could barely move at all. We would be on the sidewalk of a 15-foot stretch of road, an intersection that's 15 feet wide. And the light would change, and the countdown symbol would start at 17 and go counting down all the way to 0. And that was how long the crosswalk would be open to pedestrian traffic. And at the end, my girls were so old and so slow, so blind, that it took us that whole time just to get across that little space. It took us that whole time just creeping along. And people in cars used to point and smile, and people on the sidewalk used to point and smile. And that must have been what I looked like, just creeping along like that. Very different from nowadays, when I have a little 10-pound ball of lint she bustles along. She doesn't pull on the leash. She's not bad on the leash at all. It's one of the many things that she just understood right away what to do. But she bustles. She's in constant motion when we're on the sidewalk, noticing everything, seeing everything, noticing everything, and bustling along. It's a very different thing. But anyway, when I got back, I rooted around in my books. Now, there's one book I got that I'm not going to show you because it's a gift. But all the others, I want to show you. And there's some stuff here that I'm so happy to have found. Like this first one. I had this exact paperback. I would really like it if there were a better paperback of this. I would really like it if there were a Penguin Classic of this, or if somebody reprinted a nice edition. Because I don't know how long this is going to last, even if I reinforce it, which I will. This is William Ruffhead. This is Classic Crimes, with an Edward Gorey cover. It has an introduction by Julian Simmons, who you saw on this channel a little bit ago. The Bloody Art of Murder. I have it here somewhere nearby. The Brattle recently, about a month ago, got an enormous collection. Maybe it was more than a month ago. An enormous collection of mystery novels. Just gigantic. I think I mentioned it in a couple of Brattle book hauls before. Just endless mountains of mass market paperbacks, trade paperbacks, hardcovers of mystery novels. And I have restrained myself from just pigging out on those things because there's very little point in it. I get mystery novels in the mail, and I get enough of them to satisfy my itch. And you can bet your bottom dollar that I'm going to get rid of any mystery novels that I get at the Brattle. I got from Todd at Todd's Bursting Bookcase, I got the whole set of the Judge D mysteries. I'm never going to get rid of those again. But that's a very different thing from, fly-by-night stuff that you would see by the hundreds of these things. So I have restrained myself and contented myself with searching that mystery collection for nonfiction. Julian Simmons' book, The Bloody Art of Murder, where he surveys the mystery novel genre, type by type, author by author. It's a terrific, terrific book. Don't know what happened to my previous copy. This is the same thing. This is William Ruffhead writing up in narrative form classic crimes, real life crimes. He doesn't adapt them into mystery novels of his own. He just writes them as they are, trusting that their details will make them fascinating enough for anybody, for any mystery fan. He's absolutely right. This is a fantastic linchpin book. And every time I've ever had it, I've had it in this old yellowed trade paperback that I reinforce and then I get rid of it to somebody. I'm going to try and hold on to this one, but I really wish that there were a better edition. Probably there is. Probably there's a nice expensive hardcover or something that I would never get in a million years. Then this next one is one that I have not read. This was these were all dirt cheap. In fact, they were free because I have a very generous Brattle credit that one of you gave me. Hence this video and all the other videos. You want Brattle videos to continue, you know how to achieve that. Simply call the Brattle Bookshop in Boston and say, I want to give Steve a store credit. You probably, depending on who you get on the phone, you probably won't even need to identify my last name. Just to say, I'd like to give Steve a store credit next time he shows up to make it out to Steve and Frida. But I'm still using that credit. I'm a very cheap date when it comes to the Brattle. I'm not in there looking for $500 first editions. But this is a Pimlico trade paperback. It's a UK trade paperback imprint. I don't know that Pimlicos are made anymore, but I love them. Don't know why. I just do. Well, it doesn't take much to get me to buy a Pimlico trade paperback, no matter what it is, no matter what it's about. But when I see one that's on something that I really am interested in, so much the better. And look at this thing. This is Brian Masters' The Dukes. A Pimlico trade. That's what it's a. This is how you can tell it's a Pimlico, because it's split right in the middle there, plus the name Pimlico. But this is his study of the Dukes of England. As a class, as a group of people, here we have a classic portrait. See all of the iconic stuff. The Lord is proving there's a dead stag. He's handing a dead fowl to a child. He's proving his prowess as a hunter. He's also proving the bounty of his lands. And the dog is there to show that he's the master of his own hunt. And he's handing his catch-off to his children. He has children. He is fertile, and his wife is young and beautiful and has a brand new child on her lap. And in the distance is the palatial home. All of this land that you can see belongs to him. All of that iconic stuff in this painting. Who is this painting anyway? This is The Duke of Atholl and Family by David Allen, which is in a private collection. The private collection almost certainly is The Duke of Atholl. But one way or another, this is a study of the Dukes of England. How fantastic! So I'm in the mood to read these things. I'm not reading new releases at the moment, so why not? Why not dive right in? Now this next one, I think I have hauled this on this channel before. I'm pretty sure that I have. This is one of my favorite American biographers and historians. She's a terrific person, a wonderful, wonderful worker, and a wonderful writer as well. Her books cover all sorts of, she's done biographies, she's done period histories, and they would be valuable anyway because of the strength of her intellect, the strength of her research. But she's also a wonderful writer. When the time comes for her to assemble all of her material and write her narrative, she doesn't forget that part of it like so many historians do. And I think I've shown this book on this channel before, but this is the copy I'm going to keep. Come hell or high water, I'm going to keep this. This is Ecstatic Nation by Brenda Wineapple. There you have that classic painting of Lincoln being adored by the populace. This is Confidence, Crisis, and Compromise, 1848 to 1877. So it's not just Lincoln. It's a lot of other stuff too. Starts out with John Quincy Adams on the first page and moves on from there and brings to vivid life a whole host of minor actors on the political stage during those decades. All the major ones are here as well, but this is just a terrific book. It's just a terrific work of history, not just for the insight that it brings to the time period, but also for how it's written, which is no small thing. If you're a fan, as I am, of writers like Bruce Catton or Samuel Eliot Morison, then you really appreciate when a historian gives you a good book, a book that's readable in addition to being interesting. So this has, this has blurbs from everybody. James Oakes, James McPherson, Robert Massey, the late Robert Massey, David Blight, who went on to write a gigantic biography of Frederick Douglass, Annette Gordon Reed, John Meacham, Ron Chernow, just the who's who of American historians. As well it should. But as soon as I saw this, I realized I didn't have a copy, so now I do, and I won't be getting rid of it. But the last thing I want to show you, this is 2 volumes, and this just put a smile on my face. Was not expecting this at all. I read this. I had a copy of this, it's a 2-volume biography, and I had a copy of this years ago. And in this case, unlike so many books that I had years ago and didn't have when I got to the Brattle and saw them again, I know exactly what happened to my old 2-volume copy of this set. I broke it apart. I used it until it literally fell apart, until there was nothing I could do with it. Couldn't resell it, couldn't give it to anybody, no point in keeping it, couldn't use it. So I just wrapped it up in paper and threw it away. And I'm going to be more gentle with this one. This is Isabella DEste, A Study of the Renaissance by Julia Cartwright, in 2 volumes. This is a 2-volume biography of Isabella DEste. And this is from 1903, 1904, something like that. This is never going to be reprinted. And Isabella DEste, since then, has had at least 2 made modern English language biographies that I know of, but nothing beats this. Nothing beats Julia Cartwright. She's just fantastic. As super brainy, basically autodidacts often are. She's just fantastic. She knows perfectly well that she doesn't have any kind of institutional gravitas to fall back on. Autodidacts are always like that. That's what makes them so incredibly, I envy them so much. And that's what makes them so fearsome, is that they can't rest. They can't rest on anything. They have to prove themselves, and this is, it's just terrific. It's written. Talk about writing style. Good Lord. I mean, it goes without saying that any work of history written in the Edwardian era is going to be better written than anything today. But it's also exhaustively researched, and the reason why mine looked just like this. It brought back such memories. In fact, when I saw these at the Brattle, my very first thought was, are those mine? Then I remembered, oh no, they're certainly not yours, because you destroyed yours. And the reason that I did is because I wanted to know what it would be. I write novels. Those of you who are new to my channel, I write novels for my own entertainment. I've long since stopped trying to get an agent or get them published or anything like that. Instead, I write them for my own enjoyment. It's a tremendously enjoyable thing to do. Ask anybody who has just recently tried NaNoWriMo for the first time if they liked the feeling of writing a novel. They will all tell you that they did. It's a tremendous feeling. And I don't deprive myself of it. But a long time ago, I was still doing that, and I wanted to know what it would be like to write a 1,000-page book. To write a novel in which I conceive it, plan it, and execute it specifically to be over 1,000 pages. I wanted to see what that would be like, if that would be some new through-the-looking-glass feeling or something or other. And I chose as my canvas the year 1515, AD 1515. And at the beginning of that year, I pick a cast of 8 or 9 historical characters, no made-up people, for my main characters. I pick a cast of those, and one of them is the Venetian printer, Aldus Manutius, and he is murdered by a black-garbed figure, and his nearest and dearest, his estate, will falsify the records of his death so that it looks like the way it is in his biography. But in reality, in this novel, he is murdered by a black-clad assassin. And at the beginning of 1515, my novel, that is, at the beginning of 1515, he's not the only one. There are a large number of people who are attacked at the same time in many different countries, many different time zones, each by a black-clad, knife-wielding assassin. And that cast includes Leonardo da Vinci, who saves himself in a remarkable way. It includes Suleiman the Magnificent and also Henry VIII, a young and able Henry VIII. Those two are the only two who are able to physically defeat their opponent. They are attacked by a knife-wielding opponent and they win, even though they are not armed. But everybody else has a way. All my other characters are all famous, and at least at one stage or another of fame, and they all manage to survive somehow, and one of those characters is Isabella DEste, and her means her means of foiling her attacker long enough for her guards to deal with him was I, it had me cackling just like I'm cackling now. When I originally thought about it, it originally came to me on a subway ride, and I started cackling like a lunatic in front of him. It involves Isabella DEste kept with her at all times a little person, a midget. It's just the way of the times. It was just for amusement's sake. Although she came to like her method of escape from her initial attacker involves her midget, and it's not correct in any way. But of course, that was just the beginning of a 1,000-page novel, and all the rest of it was going to be these characters slowly learning that each one was attacked and trying to figure out why. What could possibly connect them all, and who could do it, and why. And each one, I told it in rotating, limited first-person narratives, so that you'd get a Henry VIII chapter, you'd get an Erasmus chapter, you'd get a Leonardo chapter. And for each one of those chapters, I did an enormous amount of research into each of those people, because I figured I would weave in flashbacks, I would weave in bits and pieces from their past as they wonder if maybe there's something in their past that links them all and explains these attacks. And I was on good ground to do that with a lot of the figures that I picked. Henry VIII, for instance, Erasmus, Leonardo. But Isabella DEste, no, she was the one going into the project. She was the one I knew comparatively the least about, because as Julia Cartwright says at the beginning of this biography, she'd never had a biography before in English. Before this, so there wasn't a whole lot to go on in English, and I found this 2-volume thing and read it till it fell apart. Used the heck out of it. So to find this here where I can read it normally now, I'm hard on my books, just as a matter of course, but not that hard. So I can read these now and enjoy them, and I'll have them in my collection. That's wonderful. So it was, I think, a successful Brattle trip, especially including the one book I'm not showing you, that is a present that is going to make its recipient squeal with girlish glee. I think. So that was my trip to the Brattle. I don't know if I'll go to the Brattle again before the end of the year, but if I do, you'll be the first to know. So I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.